All right, who's ready? Ready for this, everybody? I think the season is back upon us, everyone. Let's go! Let's do this! Oh my goodness, welcome in, everybody. Nice to have y'all back. Hello. Do you feel the leaves changing and all that good stuff? Like, I don't know, but I can't speak for that. But it is good to see you all here tonight. My name once again is Dave Medina. You know me as Davey's Eating a Sandwich on all the platforms and all the scenarios. Good to see you. And we have come to that special time of the year when we are previewing the college football season. And to do this appropriately, it brings me a great pleasure to introduce one of my good friends of the program, John in Connecticut, who is, I'm sure, just as pumped about this as I am. And gosh, so many changes in college football this coming season and next coming season. We are in for a completely new college football started soon, everybody. So we're gonna preview the season in two shows. So tonight we're gonna start with the group of five conferences, so the mid majors and so on, and then we'll have the Power Five tomorrow, same time, same place here on the Solve Scenarios. So let's do it. John, good to have you back. It's that time again, and boy, what a time it is. John, it's good to see you again. How's it going tonight?
Doing well, Dave. Yeah, this is an exciting time for sure to be a college football fan with the season literally almost 10 days away with the week zero games. But man, what a turn of events last week with the conference realignment. I know we'll get into all of that, but yeah, certainly a very exciting time of the year. Lots to discuss. We all love the group of five conferences here on the show. Often you can get some decent value with some of the odds, the lines, if some of these games aren't as, high profile compared to, say, like the SEC or Big Ten. So gives you some good wagering opportunities. And I know Andy and yourself feel the same way. So, yeah, great to be here and excited to dive into all this.
Yeah, and thank you again for doing this. Of course, John. I'm with you on that. I mean, it's going to be quite a time. Like, so let's go look at the storylines to start. I mean, and as you mentioned, realignment really is at the forefront of it for really the entire sport. But the group of five is certainly a big role, has a big role in this. We'll get to that in a second, but first let's talk about the expansion of college football to 12 playoff to 12 teams. Finally, we get it, and I think it's much overdue. You can see that it was the old format. One could even say it was getting stale because you just had the same teams all the time. But now you give the group of five a better chance to win a national championship this way. I'll just quickly run down the format. So new format begins in 2024. The first round will have on-campus games like the week before, like December 20th, 21st for next year anyway. That's how it'll be. And then when we would be having the New York Six, that would be the quarterfinals. The semis will be on January 9th and January 10th of 2025, I believe. So that's when normally you would have had in previous years would have been the national championship, and the championship game will be the week after, or maybe a little bit more, like maybe a little bit after that, on the 20th. So yeah, I think in generally net positive. John, I'll get your thoughts on the college football playoff expansion.
Yeah, I can't argue against having more teams with the chance to win the national title. Although inevitably, I think you might run into the same problems where, you know, uh, like all the at-large teams are going to be, SEC, Big Ten, Big 12. That's the only conferences that are going to be existing, and I guess ACC too. But at least for now, there's going to be at least one spot for the group of five, the highest rated group of five champion. And then if another one is highly ranked, they can be in the playoff too. So yeah, I think it's a great situation. I love the on campus games for the first round. I know after that they're going to move to the bowl games and they want to protect the bowls and all this and that, but I think that's going to go away because they're going to see how much of a buzz and like just like a draw that the on-campus playoff games are. And I think they're going to change that for the second round. Like when the teams that get the bye, when they start their play, they're not going to want to play at a bowl game. They're going to want to play it at home and get that advantage like the teams in the first round did. So I can see that changing, honestly, all the way up to the The national championship game has to be on a neutral site, but I could see all the way up to the semifinals. I could see being on a neutral site. Now, it might not happen overnight, but in my opinion, I think it would be better for the overall playoff if that were to happen, just to have neutral site games all the way through. And like I said, I think we'll eventually see that once a couple of years goes by, and these like first round games on campus are just unbelievable. Um, I think we'll see that happen in the later rounds. And we'll see how it goes in terms of how they want to structure it. Obviously with the Pac-12 going away, or maybe they resurrect themselves and add some more teams. We'll see what happens. But um, I think a lot of just to touch on one thing with the realignment, I think a lot of this was short-sighted, especially some of these schools from the Pac-12. Like, yeah, I get it. You're going to be making a lot more money in, say, the Big Ten, but your chances to make the college football playoff just went down by like 30%. You're all battling against each other rather than staying in the Pac-12 where you were guaranteed a playoff spot to the champion. So, obviously the TV deal and all that, we can talk about it, but a little bit short-sighted in terms of a competitive edge for some of those schools. But it's definitely going to be fascinating to see starting next year. So this is really like the last year of college football as we know it, basically, which is kind of exciting. Yet, you know, we have to wait and see how it all plays out.
You really do. I think you've made some really good points. First, your prediction about how they're going to want the on-campus games more is a really good prediction. I think that's really great. I'd like to welcome our friend King Dapricker to the chat. Like, welcome in. The change should be interesting. Yeah, very much so. I mean, I'm a little sad about it, to be honest. Like, the Pac-12 was great. We're getting more to that tomorrow when we do the Power 5 conferences, but it sucks. I mean, what can I say? I mean, I love the idea of USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, but now that like the rest, like Oregon and Washington are going with them, as you mentioned, now you're just basically recreated like basically the best of the Pac-12. I mean, in the Big Ten, it's like, well, what have you gained? Like, if you gained, like if you were just playing like Iowa and like Nebraska, you probably would have been all right. But now you have Washington and Oregon too, so that definitely complicates things. But what can you do? What else was I gonna say about that? No, it's great. Going back to the group of five, like the group of five realignment in and of itself is really fascinating. I mean, first of all, Conference USA gets hosed. Like almost all the teams leave. Like I'm reading it like Jackson State, Liberty, New Mexico. Oh my gosh, I feel bad for Conference USA. But the Big 12, wow. They should change the name of their conference. It's not even like somebody made a good point on one of the podcasts I was listening to. Is like most of the original Big 12 members aren't even in there anymore. Like you don't have Texas, you don't have Oklahoma. Like Missouri and A&M left a long time ago. So it's just a completely different conference. They have like 34 teams now. It's just a little ridiculous. So, and the AAC is actually getting kind of took over most of Conference USA, which is, I don't know if you feel that's good, positive or not. It seems like an exciting situation there. And then you've got UConn and San Diego State, which could also join the Big 54 next year.
Fingers crossed. Got my UConn shirt on. That's, there was rumors last week that if the Pac-12 had not completely just disbanded, that it was going to be UConn, it was going to be the extra school on top of Colorado, and then the Pac whatever would have stayed together. But since that fell apart, like UConn is kind of they were pushed down the list, understandably so. Yeah. But you figure they'd want the 5-time national champion basketball school since 1998, and football's getting better. We can talk about them, but yeah, it is what it is at this point for UConn realignment. But yeah, do you want me to discuss some of this group of 5 realignment for this year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So we kind of talked about this before. It's like the meme with the 2 Spider-Mans, pointing at each other. That's basically like the AAC and Conference USA, like the old Conference USA and the new AAC, because that's basically what it is. They lose their best 3 teams, arguably, with Cincinnati, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. Obviously, BYU was independent, and they joined the Big 54, as you said. But arguably those are the 3 best programs in the AAC. Although funny enough, Tulane was the best team last year because they won the conference and had that memorable bowl game with USC. So Tulane stays, but yeah, the schools they add, it's just like there's kind of like no. Some of them I can understand, but others there's just like no rhyme or reason to it. So like, yeah, okay, UTSA, I get it. Like emerging program, huge stadium, like campus, like that's a school with some potential for sure. Um, Florida Atlantic, same thing. You get the Miami market, they have some potential. Like they're kind of a newer FBS school, but I can see it. North Texas, it's like, yeah, you kind of already got UTSA. I don't really see the point to that. Same with Rice. I really don't understand that one either. It's like, how many teams in Texas do you need? UAB, good program from CUSA, but who the hell knows now with Trent Dilfer? We can get to that. I mean, that's just going to be a disaster. And then Charlotte, kind of getting at that mid Atlantic market. So I like some of their additions. Some I could have kind of done without. I don't know what some of these like North Texas and Rice and UAB really do for you. Maybe creating more rivalries. I don't know. But we'll see. I think the AAC did a good job though getting UTSA and Florida Atlantic. I definitely like those additions. And then as you mentioned, when you go to Conference USA, yeah, they kind of they were left with what, four schools, so they're kind of in the same position that the Pac-4 is in at this point. So
Yeah.
they had to scramble. So they added New Mexico State and Liberty, who are independents. I mean, New Mexico State is just they've just been a perennial doormat for years, but they went bowling last year, so maybe a little hope for them in the future with Jerry Kill. Liberty's been a really good independent, and I think that they get stigmatized because of like their values and the way their school is and everything, and to each their own on that. But in terms of like resources and money put into the program, like they're better than a lot of these group of five schools in terms of what they do for that. So I think that they were definitely a good addition. They might win the league this year. And then they have two schools coming up from the FCS, Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State. Sam Houston actually won the FCS championship a few years back, and Jacksonville State is coached by Rich Rodriguez. If you remember him, of course, from West Virginia and Michigan, among Arizona, among his former stops. So, an exciting name, I guess, named coach to get to the conference. And then next year they'll be adding Kennesaw State from the FCS. So they're going to have 10 teams or 10 schools starting next year, assuming no other movement happens. And then the only other realignment for this season was BYU heading over from an independent to join the Big 12. So that was your realignment from this year. I don't mind the ads, honestly, from Conference USA. I think they did a pretty good job, and they honestly would have been in much better shape if they kept some of these other schools. Like I said, I don't think the AAC needed to add like all these like Texas schools. Like
Right.
UTSA would have been good enough. But hey, Conference USA is slowly building itself back up. So I did see that it's going to be much tougher now for schools to jump from FCS to FBS in the future. So we might not see as many of these moves, like conferences backfilling their rosters with FCS schools, because a lot of them probably could jump and do it pretty you know make it pretty successful for themselves. But I guess there's like a huge monetary donation or payment required now to the NCAA to do that. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Conference USA did pretty good, and I think the AAC did okay for the most part. I just think they went a little overboard on some of the teams they grabbed. But it's going to create for it's a whole new conferences here.
Yeah. And actually, the Sunbelt did some realignment too, and I think some of that's taking effect this year. My reading and my understanding is Marshall, Old Dominion, and Southern Miss are starting this year with them.
Oh, that was last year.
That was last year. Okay,
came on board.
Okay, all right.
Yep. So year two of their new dynamic.
Okay, very good. Last thing on as far as storylines, I don't have a lot as far as coaching changes, but Satterfield's joining Cincinnati. That's a pretty big story, and so I'd love to get your thoughts on Satterfield too.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of his at Louisville. He did okay. There's kind of a bowl team every year. I guess he kind of left when you always kind of leave when you're, I guess, like, allowed to be fired on the hot seat, and that's kind of what he did, going over to Cincinnati. But it's a tough situation because Fickle leaves, and you kind of have to remake the entire roster. So maybe not, and you're going up in class from the AAC to the Big 12 too. with your schedule. So that could be a transition for them the first year under Satterfield and Cincinnati. But I guess we can dive more into them when we talk about the Big 12.
Yep.
Trying to think if there's any. I guess we can kind of get to the coaching changes as we go through the various conferences. But Dave, I've been putting together a list of like all the transfer quarterbacks, because that's the other thing. Like the transfer portal is just insane.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you give me a minute, I'll read them off to you.
Go for it.
Some of the names you might recognize, some of them you might not. Now honestly, I didn't like mark down any third string quarterbacks. Like these are quarterbacks that are going from one school that were like starters, started some games, and then are projected to be the starter at their new school. So, all right, here we go. Tyler Buckner from Notre Dame to Alabama. Spencer Sanders goes from Oklahoma State to Ole Miss. Devin Leary goes from NC State to Kentucky. Graham Mertz goes from Wisconsin to Florida.
Mertz.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. A lot of these we'll get to tomorrow night when we talk about the group of the Power 5 schools. But yeah, that one, not sure how that one's going to work out for the Gators, but we'll see. Jake Garcia goes from Miami, Florida to Missouri. Tanner Mordecai goes from SMU to Wisconsin. Cade McNamara goes from Michigan to Iowa. Luke Altmaier goes from Ole Miss to Illinois. Jeff Sims goes from Georgia Tech to Nebraska. Ben Bryant goes from Cincinnati to Northwestern. Hudson Card goes from Texas to Purdue. Phil Jurkovic goes from Boston College to Pittsburgh. Brendan Armstrong goes from Virginia to NC State. Jack Plummer goes from Cal to Louisville. Haynes King goes from Texas A&M to Georgia Tech. Alan Bowman goes from Michigan to Oklahoma State. Keaton Slovis goes from Pitt to BYU.
Wow.
Donovan Smith. Yeah, he's still playing, Dave. Can you believe it?
I know, this is like his third transfer in like 3 years.
Yeah, it's crazy with the COVID year, and then you take a red shirt, and like you can get injured, you can be playing. We'll get to this with the Conference USA preview, but Jacksonville State's quarterback is like in his 8th year of eligibility. Wow. It's crazy. Donovan Smith goes from Texas Tech to Houston. Emory Jones goes from Arizona State to Cincinnati. Colin Schlee goes from Kent State to UCLA. Shadur Sanders goes from Jackson State to Colorado, and obviously the big move there is Deion Sanders' son. So we'll get into them some more. Drew Pine goes from Notre Dame to Arizona State. And that's pretty much all the Power 5 quarterback transfers. Now there's a few Group of 5 ones as well that I'll read off now. Chandler Rogers from ULM to North Texas. Casey Thompson from Texas to Florida Atlantic. JT Daniels, another guy. How does he still know? He does. Goes from West Virginia to Rice.
Right.
Dylan Hopkins from UAB to New Mexico. Brendan Lewis from Colorado to Nevada. Mikey Keene from UCF to Fresno State. Davis Brin from Tulsa to Georgia Southern. JT Shrout from Colorado to Arkansas State.
Wow.
Malik Hornsby from Arkansas to Texas State. Hayden Wolf from Old Dominion to Western Michigan. Lane Hatcher from Texas State to Ball State. Connor Basilick from Missouri to Bowling Green. And last but certainly not least, Hank Bachmeyer from Boise State to Louisiana Tech. So that's quite a number of quarterback transfers that you have. And honestly, you have to keep an eye on it, because if you're trying to bet the games, you have to know who's playing quarterback. So the research now definitely pays off later.
Oh yeah, some of those folks are. I mean, there's a lot of like mediocrity, just lateral movement, basically.
Yes. Some of the moves are interesting. Some we'll get to a few of them. It's like, wow, they got this guy from like a Power 5 school. Like that's a huge upgrade. And others, it's just kind of like, all right, he's just going from Old Dominion to Western Michigan. Not exactly gonna light anything on fire.
Right.
It kind of, it's just maybe he got some playing time, whatever. But so it's kind of a little bit of a different thing.
Indeed. Well, let's get to our previews, John. We're gonna start with your AAC, or it was your AAC.
Not
anymore. So now it's just the AAC. But let's head into it. Like, who would you pick? This is something like Cincinnati's in this period of transition, as we know, with the coaching change. It's going to be an interesting year. Let's see what you think of the AAC this year.
Well, Cincinnati's gone, so they're in the Big 12 this
Yep.
year. So they're not even in the conference. So I think this is no before we get into the meat of all the teams and whatnot, I will say like if you had to rank the group of five conferences, I'd say it's pretty close between the AAC, Sun Belt, and Mountain West now because of those losses that the AAC had. The bottom of the Sun Belt and Mountain West is pretty bad. So I think on just pure depth alone, I would say the AAC is probably a little bit better. But the top of each of those leagues are very, very comparable. And then I would say the MAC and then the Sun Belt are a little bit. I'm sorry, MAC and Conference USA are a little bit behind those first three, but very, very comparable for those three leagues. If I had to make like a pecking order, there's a clear like top five teams, and I don't know however order you want to put them in, but UTSA, Tulane, SMU, Memphis, and then I think Florida Atlantic is a real sleeper team this year, and we can get to them. But Tulane's obviously the defending conference champion. Dave, I know you're a big Willie Fritz fan. He almost left for Georgia Tech in the offseason,
Oh
but
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, decided to stick it out with the Green Wave, and they're back. Uh, Michael Pratt returns, their quarterback. They lose Tajay Spears to the NFL. Like that dude was just a playmaker. Like remember from the bowl game, he was like running. Had a great game against USC, and like just on the field, like man, this guy is an NFL player. But they should still be pretty good. UTSA, we've been a fan of them on this podcast for a while. They returned Frank Harris somehow for another year playing quarterback. Their coach didn't go anywhere. They did lose some guys in the transfer portal, some of their receivers, which happens. If you're a great group of five program, you're going to lose some of your best players on occasion to Power Five schools that can do like NIL deals and whatnot. But they should still be really good. They're very talented, and like I said, I just love the program, the direction of their program. Um, SMU should be, their offense is just incredibly explosive. Even though they lose Mordecai to Wisconsin, Preston Stone takes over, and he got a number of starts last year. And I remember the game against Houston; it was like a ridiculous score. It was like 77-63 or something. Like Houston scored 63 points and lost against SMU, which was pretty impressive. Memphis is another team that should be in contention. They lost a number of close games last year, so their record was only 7-6, but it was a little deceiving. They lost a number of close games, so their record could have been much better. And Seth Hennigan returns at quarterback. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the AAC. And then the last team I'll mention for this little group is Florida Atlantic, like I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Great head coaching hire, in my opinion. Gone is Willie Taggart. He can only do 6-6 or barely 5-7. They couldn't get to a bowl in his only 2 years there. And in comes Tom Herman. And we remember him from being at Houston and then at Texas. And he really wasn't that bad at Texas. I mean, we kind of talk about it all the time. They kind of have an overinflated perception of what they should be doing. And he had some good years. Obviously, he didn't like win a national championship, but he's winning 9-10 games. Like he won some bowl games, and they got rid of him for Sarkisian. And then Herman, he takes like the year off to go into broadcasting and whatnot, and now he comes back into a really good situation, and he brings over Casey Thompson, his former quarterback at Texas, who transfers in, like as I mentioned, who was at Nebraska last year, and it really didn't fit him because remember Nebraska was just a complete disaster last year with Frost, and then he gets fired and everything else, and now he's back in a familiar system. They have a bunch of other good transfers coming in. And I like this team a lot, so I think they're a potential sleeper if you want to make like a long shot pick to win this conference. To make the conference championship game. And what I'm trying to say is that there's no more divisions in the AAC, so it's just the top
Mm-hmm.
two
Yep.
get to the championship game. So even if they could somehow get into second place, they're in the game at that point. So I definitely like them as like a long shot pick. So those are the kind of the clear like top five in my opinion in the league. And we can talk about some of the other teams in a little bit, but I'm interested to hear kind of what your feeling is on some of these the teams at the top.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm pretty much in step with most of that. I mean, you can't ever count. I mean, uh, you can never really count out teams like Tulane. It's funny. I didn't realize how long Willie Fritz had been coaching college football. Then I've kind of seen him lately, getting a little long in the tooth. I got to say. I mean, he's been around a long. He's really been around a while, and so I'm really. It's hard not to root for him. You know, that's I'm kind of biased in that. I'm kind of curious about UTSA. I think they could be pretty solid. I mean, it's a fun team to watch, and same for SMU. Although their defense continues to be pretty bad, so you know, it's just. I mean, pretty much echoing most of what you were saying earlier. I mean, it is going to be a very different year without Houston and Cincinnati in the conference in this year. So I kind of wonder. And you remember that Navy hit rock bottom too, and then that's kind of wild to me because like Navy just seems like they'd always been solid. I'm curious to see where they go. I actually say I have no feel. I probably see them going like I don't know, like 5 and whatever, five wins this year. So I don't really see much there. Let's see. Anybody that I feel like we should look out for? Not really. I think everything here is pretty much in step with what you were saying.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say if you want to talk about some of the other teams in the conference, East Carolina had it's kind of funny for them. Like their players graduated at the wrong time because if their team from last year was in the AAC this year, they'd be one of the favorites. But it just so happened like all their best players graduated. Holton Ahlers, I know Andy's a fan of his. He's kind of like a little bigger group of 5 version of Tim Tebow. But he graduated, as did Keaton Mitchell, their all-star running back. So they've lost a ton of other production. So they're going to be down this year, but you know their team last year would have contended, but they're kind of like on the next tier. Navy, like you said, Dave, they kind of bottomed out, but you know their defense ended up being pretty good, and it was crazy that they kind of fired their longtime coach,
Yeah.
Ken Niumatalolo. I think I pronounced that right. But they did keep some consistency within their program. They promoted their defensive coordinator, Brian Newberry, who, you know, has been with the program. So it's not someone coming in that doesn't know like the traditions and styles and whatever of Navy and how they run the option offense. Although there's like this new cut blocking rule. So some teams, like the teams that run the option, like Army, Navy, Air Force, they're going to have to maybe do a little more passing or just get creative with their schemes or else they're going to get flagged. But I think yeah, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. I mean, the triple option is one of the unique, cool things about college football. Like, I don't know why they're trying to take that away. It's ridiculous. I mean, they could, you know, cry player safety, whatever, but, you know, I think it's a little overboard, just like with some of the targeting stuff that gets called for. But, yeah, Navy should be kind of a middle of the pack team. You know, Temple should be, again, kind of middle of the pack. EJ Warner, Kurt's son, took over last year, and they really had a spark to their offense once he came in. So I think they should be a little bit better. North Texas and Rice are just kind of bleh. Although we did mention JT Daniels coming in for Rice, so we'll see what they can do with that. They were actually pretty good last year before they had just a number of quarterback injuries, and you know, they really struggled down the stretch. So maybe with like a stability at quarterback, they can be pretty good. And then I'll mention the rest of the teams all have new coaches. So North Texas is coached by Eric Morris, a former disciple of Mike Leach. Rest in peace for sure for Coach Leach. So they're going to be running a new offense. And they actually, if you remember, they went to the Conference USA Championship game last year, and they fired their coach. Unfortunately, Austin Aune, who was like 30 years old, does not have, or he had some eligibility, but he's not playing this year. For the Mean Green as they transition to the AAC, but we'll see how that works out with the new coach. I mean, they were pretty talented, but you know, again, a little bit of a step up in competition for them. Same with Rice; they're kind of towards the bottom, and then the bottom kind of projected teams all have new coaches. So Charlotte, Biff Poggi, what a name, comes over. He was like an assistant coach at Michigan. Before that, he was like in the investment world and like hedge funds and all this. And I don't know if you've seen like some of the clips from him at Media Day. It's like hilarious. He's like, "You only got 3 questions for me? Well, that's it. I'm, you know, disrespecting us." Like it's crazy. Like you need to watch the video of this guy. Like it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving all year. But they should be pretty bad.
Oh boy.
You know, he did upgrade the talent with a lot of transfers, but it'll be interesting to see. USF, they kind of really got screwed in all this realignment business. You know, rivals UCF gets the Big 12, and here they are wasting away in the AAC. Like,
Ooh.
I don't know, kind of sucks, but for them. But they bring over Alex Golish from Tennessee. He was their offensive coordinator. Obviously Tennessee had a very potent offense, but again, you always kind of worry about these things like who was actually calling the plays at Tennessee. Was it him or was it Josh Heupel? Tulsa brings in Kevin Wilson, who used to coach at Indiana. He was the offensive coordinator in Oklahoma, so he's going to bring in a lot of offense, but it's going to be a little bit of a rebuild there because, as you mentioned, in our transfer segment, Davis Brin, their quarterback, transferred out. And then certainly last but not least, UAB, Trent Dilfer. Like, what? Like, you could just see him. We used to joke about him holding the
The
pencil as
pencil.
he's talking on ESPN.
Yeah.
Like, does he do that in the locker room? I mean, I don't get it. Like UAB was like a solid program for years under Bill Clark, and he had some health issues or personal issues or whatever. He stepped down, and their interim coach last year did a pretty good job. Like he got them bowling. They finished 7 wins, but no, like we're gonna get rid of the continuity, and we're gonna have Trent Dilfer come in straight off the ESPN desk and coaching high school football in Tennessee, and he brings over his entire like staff from high school. Like it's a high school coaching staff basically, and they lost basically just a ton of players. It's going to be fun to fade them all year. So looking forward to the Trent Dilfer experience at UAB. But yeah, so those are kind of like the bottom 4 teams. Um, UAB, Charlotte, USF, and Tulsa. Kind of take your pick on
Mhm.
on whatever. But yeah, that's kind of the dead weight the AAC,
Yep.
and I don't really see any of them kind of making a jump. But going to be fun to follow these train wrecks all year.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I mean, like it'll be entertaining.
Yes.
All right, so let's get to Conference USA. Boy, again, like Conference USA already is gonna be feeling some of the damages of all this realignment already this year. So just to give you an idea, the top 4 teams in the conference last year: UTSA, North Texas, Western Kentucky, and Middle Tennessee. Only Middle Tennessee is left over from that conference. The other 3 have moved on to different conferences. So that's a bummer. Like that's like all the top talent, all the top teams are out.
But Western is still there, Dave. Western
Oh,
Kentucky's
wait,
still in.
oh, wait, hold on, let me.
Yep, they're
Wait,
in.
where am I saying? Oh yeah, I see him. Okay, never mind. Take that back. But I'm sorry, it's hard to keep.
Still, your point remains. The 2 teams in the championship game are no longer there.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one to evaluate. So John, I'll give it to you to first give your look at it. Who's going to win this conference this year?
Yeah, this is an interesting conference. I'm looking forward to the newbies coming up. Like I said before, Sam Houston and Jacksonville. Just a quick couple nuggets on them. So we mentioned Jacksonville State with Rich Rodriguez coming in. Their quarterback Zion Webb, it's like his 7th year of playing college football, which is just crazy. But I guess of all the years to like have a 7-year quarterback, it's now coming into a new conference. They did play one FBS team last year, Tulsa, and they lost 17-54. So
Ooh.
we'll see if it works out for them. They're certainly going to have a decent offense. I don't know about after that. But the Conference USA schedule, it's not terrible. But if they play like they did in that one FBS game, it's gonna be a rough road to hoe for them. Sam Houston, as I mentioned, they won the FCS title. I believe in 2017. I have to go back to look, but it was in recent history they won the national championship. Maybe even a little bit after that. Maybe it was 2020. I'm not sure, but I know it was in recent memory. And I did read that they didn't have a great season last year in the FCS. However, they redshirted a lot of their best players in preparation for this move to jump up to the FBS. So they could be a little better than you think. They could be pretty sneaky good. So we'll keep an eye on them. I honestly don't know what to make of them at all. So I'm gonna watch their first couple games. They play BYU and Air Force the first 2 weeks. I'm sure they're gonna be getting some big spreads in those 2 games. So we'll see if they can like they show that they can compete, and then we'll kind of get on them in conference play. But the top of this conference, I think it's 2 teams here. It's Western Kentucky and it's Liberty coming into the conference. Western Kentucky, like you mentioned, they're kind of the best of the rest from the league this year. Their quarterback Austin Reed he was going to leave for transfer portal, and he decided to come back, and he led a very very prolific offense last year, and that should continue this year. Tyson Helton's their coach; he remains. They have a good receiving core, so I think they're kind of the favorite, along with Liberty, and I think Western Kentucky is the slight favorite just because they get that Liberty game at home. However, Liberty has like an absolute joke of a schedule. Like, if you want like a win total bet, like I think you should bet them over. I think it's 8 wins last I saw. They don't play a single Power Five team in their 12 games. I'm just going to quickly read their
Wow.
schedule to you. So they play Bowling Green, New Mexico State, at Buffalo, at FIU, Sam Houston, at Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, at Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech, Old Dominion, UMass, at UTEP. Like that's the schedule lottery winner of the year. Like they
Wow.
do not play a single Power Five. They don't even play like
A tough group of
crazy.
five.
It's crazy. Like the only and so they have a new coach.
Yeah.
Hugh Freeze leaves Liberty, heads back to the SEC. Fun times there. We'll see what happens with Auburn.
Is it ever?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy.
But in comes Jamie Chadwell, who was the architect of Coastal Carolina becoming a power in the Sun Belt. And one thing Freeze did do, like they had a very very talented offense. They returned like 3 or 4. They had 3 quarterbacks play last year, and they all returned. They don't have a lot of returning starters on defense. There's only 3 starters returning on defense, but I trust Chadwell as a good enough coach. And with this schedule, like this is going to be over 8 wins for sure. I don't know if they're going to win the conference because, like I said, they have that Western game on the road. But those are my 2 teams to meet for the conference championship. And then after that, like it's just kind of a meh bunch of teams. Like UTEP is, they always kind of have some high hopes. They really are just like a disappointment, kind of like a 6-6 kind of team.
Yeah.
They do have their quarterback Gavin Hardison returning, so that's a plus for them. Louisiana Tech gets Bachmeyer transfer in from Boise, so he's definitely an upgrade on what they've had recently at quarterback last year. But their defense was so bad last year. I don't know if we can trust them. Middle Tennessee State is always kind of they're a solid program. They're going to win their 6 or 7 games every year. And Stockstill's been there forever. It feels like at Middle Tennessee. But I don't think they're quite as good as Liberty and Western Kentucky, as I mentioned. New Mexico State was one of the surprises of the bowl season, or just the season in general last year. Like I mentioned, they've been a doormat for so long, and they end up getting to a bowl at 6-6. They win that bowl, even though it was Central Michigan. They still won the game, and they have a bunch of starters returning. Jerry Kill, we've talked about him on the show before.
Mm-hmm.
He's had a number of health problems, which kind of kept him out of coaching for off and on for a number of years. But wherever he went, like he's done a good job building up the program, and he seems to be doing that with New Mexico State. And they have a pretty good schedule, so maybe they're kind of a sleeper team to watch out for after those top 2 teams. And then FIU, they should be pretty bad once again, maybe on the level of the 2 the 2 newcomers with Sam Houston and Jacksonville. So yeah, this is an interesting conference. The one thing I do enjoy about this conference, and they made a great decision. I don't know if you saw this, Dave, but they're going to be playing all of their conference games in October on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays.
Oh.
So it's like you get the action in November. Now you're going to get the CUSA action in October. So it's going to be a beautiful thing. We're going to have New Mexico State and Sam Houston State on our TVs on Tuesdays and Wednesdays in October, which I think it's ingenious. You want to get more exposure for your league and your programs, and of course, like gamblers are going to be betting on them and watching them. So it's a good thing. It's a good situation for the Conference USA. But yeah, I think it's going to be Western Kentucky and Liberty is my choice for the 2 the conference championship game this year. I don't know if you had any. What were your thoughts when you were kind of looking at this league? It definitely is a lot of unknowns. With some of these,
a lot of question marks. Yeah. But definitely of the group, I probably would feel the most would depend the most on Western Kentucky at least making it to the conference championship game. I do like Liberty. You're right about Liberty. Like they've had some very solid teams in the last 5 years. Like when Malik Willis was there, it was a really dynamic team, really fun to watch. And it really hasn't changed a lot since then. I mean, surely, yeah, it's going to be different with a new coach, but I still think this is going to be a very pesky team. So look out for those guys too. So I'm pretty much in line. I also agree with Middle Tennessee; they should be fine. Um, yeah, I just wonder if UTEP might like foul up some seasons. They could play spoiler during certain parts of the year. They're not a pushover like they used to be. I mean, they're still bad, but they're 5-7.
That could be a pushover.
What was that?
Who could be a pushover or like?
Oh, UTEP, because like they were 5-7 last year. Yeah, so they're not.
Yeah, they kind of have a weird home field advantage. Like the
Mm-hmm.
stadium, it's the Sun Bowl. Like it's tucked away in the mountains there, and it's just kind
Yep.
of a little tough place to play. But yeah, I could see them upsetting a couple teams, but then like losing themselves to like a bad team.
Oh
so
yeah.
could go either way. With games will be definitely interesting to watch with all these teams really.
Yeah. No arguments on that, any of that. So yeah, that's my thoughts in Conference USA. Let's move ahead. So next, this keeps getting better because like we get to some really good conferences next. So MACtion, of course, the godfathers of the midweek game, basically. It's great to see them back too. And every year seems to be a different story. I mean, it's always fun to watch. You did mention Ohio. That's kind of a tradition in and of itself. Like the MAC team losing in the bowl season, like is kind of a thing.
Yeah, fade the MAC and the bowls. Most of the time, you're going to be making some money. They won a couple of them last year.
Yeah, they did.
If I recall.
A little bit better than most years, I think. I think definitely better in that regard. But Ohio was still pretty hilarious. Like that was like, and it wasn't even close. Like I think they got tore. If I'm remembering correctly, they got blown. They were pretty much never in it for good parts. I try to remember, but I think that's what I remember. Anyway, moving to you're always good for some excitement in this league. This is one of the few leagues that didn't really have any major realignment, but so we have a lot of familiar faces going into here. Buffalo Post Leopold is a very kind of a sad story, and now we kind of saw that last year. I would be curious as to who you would pick to win this conference. It'll be an interesting watch for sure. I mean, it's always going to be exciting though. That's the one thing we know for sure. So, John, I'll give it to you for the MAC thoughts.
Yeah, MACtion. I mean, like we said, Tuesdays and Wednesdays in November, like that's where it's at. So it's kind of Conference USA is kind of hoping to do the same thing in October. But yeah, there's no realignment here. There's nothing that's more solid than the MAC and expansion because no one's coming in and no one's leaving the MAC. At this point, they're all kind of just sticking together, which when you love to see it. So yeah, the MAC, they're sticking with their same two divisions, East and West. So obviously the winners of both will play in the championship game. And when I look at these teams, I think the obvious pick is going to be Toledo out of the West. They finally got over the hump last year and won the MAC championship. However, we'll put it with a caveat: Ohio's quarterback Rourke was hurt and he didn't play in the game. So that could be we'll see what happens this year if that's the rematch again for the championship. But we've talked about Toledo before. Like they're always probably the most talented roster and the most talented team. And again, this year they really should be. Jaquan Finn returns, like he's a playmaker at quarterback, and they're pretty loaded in general. But I just have questions about Jason Candle. He just blows a number of these games. Like 2 years ago, I'm looking at it right now. Like he lost 3 games as like a 10-point favorite or more. Like you can't trust this guy. And they finally got over the hump last year. But again, like it was because of Ohio's quarterback situation. Just they were rolling in November, and then Rourke gets hurt, and they ended up winning the MAC championship. But in any event, Toledo should be the class of the West Division. If I had to pick a team to challenge them, I like Central Michigan. You've seen Jim McElwain do it in this conference before. Like the year before he came in, they were 1-11 or 2-10 or something like that, and he got them to like 8 or 9 wins. Last year was a little bit of a rough year. They had a number of injuries, but they have that's going to help them serve them well for better depth this year. And they have an electric playmaker at quarterback, Burt Emanuel. Junior, rather, his dad obviously played in the NFL, but I remember this game against Buffalo last year in the snow. Like he was just going absolutely crazy, just running and passing, and like it was just fantastic to watch. So I do like Central Michigan as a potential challenger. I like the coaching, as I mentioned, and I think they're the second best team, I guess, in the West, and then kind of after that, Northern Illinois and Eastern Michigan, you can kind of group them together. Northern Illinois, Rocky Lombardi, another guy. Like, how does he have eligibility still left at this point? But he does. He's playing quarterback for Northern Illinois. Um, they when they made the NAC title game 2 years ago, they won like an insane number of games by like 1 or 2 points, and that's basically how they got there. That wasn't really sustainable last year. They kind of took a step back. They had some injuries, so they should be a little bit better this year. Same with Eastern Michigan. They do lose their quarterback who graduated. But I again, like the coaching in this conference, like Eastern Michigan wasn't much of anything until Chris Creighton got there, and he's really done a good job with the program. My theory with Eastern Michigan has always been you bet them when they're an underdog, you fade them when they're a favorite because they always play like just incredibly close games, and there's a lot of variance. They're kind of undersized on the defensive line, which is a little bit of an issue, but they overcome that, and they should be in the middle of the pack of the West Division. And then your bottom two teams are Ball State and Western Michigan. There's like a complete rebuild on that side of the division. They fired their longtime coach, Tim Lester, and they bring in Lance Taylor. I don't know much about him, and they have a lot of transfers going out. As I mentioned, they brought in the quarterback from Old Dominion. I don't know if that's going to do much for them. We'll see. Ball State, again, it's kind of a similar situation. They bring in another group of five quarterback, Lane Hatcher. I mean, he's been everywhere, that guy, but I don't know. Like, I'm not really seeing, um, a lot of success for Ball State. Kind of, they might be your typical like 6-6 kind of team. But I think that's kind of the pecking order. I would say Toledo's a little bit ahead of Central Michigan, and then kind of Eastern Michigan and Northern Illinois, and then Ball State and Western Michigan are your bottom two teams. And then if you look over at the East Division, again, like you got to be all in on this Ohio team. Like the offense is just going to be electric. So Rourke is back. He's going to be healthy after that injury. Curtis Rourke, obviously his brother Nathan is tearing it up in the CFL if you follow that. And they just have playmakers all over the place. Bangura at running back is a beast, and Sam Wiglu's won me some money on DFS college football last year, like during those
Ooh,
midday
nice.
or midweek action games. Yeah, like Ohio State transfer. Their offense is just fantastic. Um, and once Solich left, he left like in the middle of spring practice, so that first year was kind of tough for them. They went 3-9, but they definitely found it last year, especially toward the end of the year, especially when Rourke was in there, and they were just the offense just clicked. I think they're going to win the East pretty easily, and they'll face off Toledo in the MAC championship in a rematch. I would like to pick against Toledo, but I just think they're too talented to even um, withstand how Candle can fuck up these games sometimes. As for the rest of the division, yeah, Buffalo and Miami are kind of the next tier, I would say. Buffalo post Leipold, like you mentioned, Dave, it's definitely a transition for them. They've been recruiting really well. They're like one of the top recruiting teams in the MAC, but we'll see if they can put it together. Miami, Ohio returns Brett Gabbert, so that kind of gives them an edge. When he was healthy, they were a very solid team. So I would say they're probably the top challenger to Ohio. And then when you go to the bottom, I actually think Akron is going to be ahead of Bowling Green and Kent State this year. Year two under Joe Moorhead, and we mentioned how good of a get it was for the back in a school like Akron to pull him in. They have a number of returning starters. They bring in Power Five transfers. That it's all going to start to mesh a little bit. I don't think they're going to be in the basement at all this year. I think they can make that jump from out of the cellar and possibly flirt with bowl eligibility. Towards the end of the season. And the two clear worst teams to me are Bowling Green and Kent State, especially Kent State, and we'll get to them in a second. But Bowling Green had one of the most experienced teams in the country last year, and they only went 6-6. And now they lose all that experience. I don't think Leffler's a good coach at all. Bowling Green is a huge fade team for me coming into the year. Same thing with Kent State, and it's crazy. So their coach Sean Lewis, who did a great job at Kent State, he leaves Kent State to be the offensive coordinator at Colorado for Deion Sanders. So he didn't even leave to be a head coach. And obviously, you're working for Coach Prime in Colorado. You're getting your name out there, but you leave an offensive. You leave for an offensive coordinator position. It kind of tells you what what value Kent State has to him, or I guess in college football in general. So the first time I've ever seen this, and just like studying or following college football, they have 0 returning starters on offense. 0.
That's crazy.
It's a whole new team of like transfers. They have a few returning starters on defense, but their defense was horrible to begin with. It's a completely new team, so it's a mystery. But at the same time, like I don't think it's going to go very well. They might not win a game all year. Maybe. Well, they play my Central Connecticut Blue Devils. So if they don't win that one, they're definitely not going to win a game. Other than that, I don't see a win on the schedule. It's going to be really rough for them. So yeah, and any under on them too, like 3.5.
Wait, just to repeat, we're talking Kent State or Akron? I was kind of losing track.
Kent State is going to be.
I see perfect. That. Yeah, I see that.
Akron, I think, can make a little bit of a jump up in the standings this year, but Kent State, 0 returning starters on offense. A running backs coach from Minnesota is their new head coach. I just don't see it with Kent State. So yeah, it's going to be a rough go for the old Golden Flashes. Yeah. But yeah. Toledo and Ohio, it's a chalk pick, but I don't see any other way to go for this conference. But I think Ohio will win it this year. I'm a big fan of Ohio, and they have a very interesting Week 0 game, Dave. We're going to talk Week 0 next week. We can get to it, but they play at San Diego State in Week 0, and that's a really fun Group of 5 matchup. Yeah.
Is that in is that in San Diego, or is that in Ohio?
That is in San Diego.
Ooh. Yep. That's tempting. I might just drive down.
Yeah, it's a good. I see the spread is like 3.5.
Nice.
I'm gonna have to take Ohio. I'm gonna have to take the money line, and I'm gonna go over on points in that one. Yeah. I think there's gonna be some points scored.
Well, that's an interesting call with the San Diego State team. Even though I know that your coaching has changed and everything, I mean, an over in a San Diego State game is a very interesting call. Well, but you know what? There's definitely something to it, though. There's definitely something to it. You'd have to see what the number is too. If it's like 40, if it's like 38, yeah, definitely try it.
It's got to be more than that.
I figure it might be more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be at least 45, I think. I'll have to check it after.
Yeah.
But
that would be very.
What were your feelings on the MAC, or any upsets, or were you kind of feeling the same for Toledo versus Ohio as like the championship?
Yeah, I definitely like Toledo. I think Toledo is just one of those teams that's always going to be in the mix. I mean, especially offensively, it's just a really fun team to watch. So I don't see any reason for that to go differently this year. I have to put myself in a huge way on a lot of levels. I'm completely borked my memory of the bowl season. So the game that I thought was hilarious was actually when Central Michigan, yeah, making sure I get this right. Central Michigan absolutely hammered. I cannot find the score. San Jose State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. That's the game.
They beat Eastern Michigan. Yes,
Eastern Michigan. Okay, so it's Eastern Michigan, and they beat. So you remember, like you're saying, you bet them when they're an underdog. A phenomenal call if you did that back then. I'm sure you did. I mean, that's a great.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of my picks for the bowl confidence. Like, yep. Those San Jose kids didn't want to go up to Boise to play in that snow or the cold. Eastern Michigan sure did. So yeah,
that's a great call.
That was the angle on that one.
So yeah, I mean, the MAC did a really good job for themselves in bowl season. I do have to owe them an apology for just like clowning them, but they had a pretty good bowl season. Like, I'm just looking through all the scores, and like it's pretty. They did a pretty good job.
I think Toledo won their game. I think they beat Liberty, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they beat them 21-19. It looks like
close game. Yep. Yeah, that was an exciting game too. I remember. Yeah, pretty good stuff. So and so New Mexico beating Bowling Green. I mean, Bowling Green was
that game annoyed me a lot.
Yeah, I can hear.
I picked Bowling Green in that game, and it was I realized after like a quarter it was a mistake. But hey, like we talked about before, New Mexico State they're doing a good job. Yep. But yeah, I think Bowling Green it's gonna be rough after losing all that experience.
Yep. I'll give you my prediction for the other division. Boy, what a call! You have to pick between Bowling Green, Buffalo, and I'm gonna go boring. I'm gonna go Ohio too. I'm gonna go with Ohio. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to overthink it. They'll be all right. They're not gonna be under 500 or anything. So Ohio and Toledo. There you go. Okay, so let's move into some juice. It just gets juicier with each of these conferences. So now we're going to the Mountain West, and we talked about San Diego State just a minute ago. They are part of a collection of teams that it's going to be pretty. Mountain West is definitely, as you were saying at the start of the show, like they've become like one of the better conferences, one of the more dependable, reliable, and particularly when you're looking for value, it's a really good conference for that standpoint. I have gone to. Is that a home run? I'm playing the role of Andy here. Oh, come on, be a home run. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
What action do you have tonight, Dave?
FanDuel. So it's my FanDuel. I have Corey Seager on my FanDuel lineup, and he just hit a 2-run home run. Everybody, let's go.
Perfect.
Nice. Anyway. Yeah. I mean, it's always a lot of fun, and I keep forgetting that they don't have divisions this year.
Yeah, they got rid of that for this year. Or maybe they started it last year.
I think they did last year too, but it's weird. Yeah, it's really weird.
I kind of like it. I mean, it's good when you have like a bunch of teams that can contend for the championship that would have been in one division, you know, because then or otherwise you end up with like the ACC Atlantic when it's a 7-5 team, or Coastal rather, it's a 7-5 team playing Clemson and they get their asses kicked every year. Rather you get the two best teams in. So I like the no division aspect.
I would love to see the Big Ten try that for a year because that would get interesting.
I think they're going to start it next year. Honestly,
oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure. So we could be getting Michigan, Ohio State every year in the Big Ten championship.
I would not complain about that. That'd be a good game. It'd be pretty good. It would be unfair.
Unless USC breaks through. And,
then I'll start griping about it. That's true. Well, let's see. So we're looking at the Mountain West, like as I was saying. I mean, a lot of solid teams here. The favorite to win the conference. This is an interesting call. I mean, you'll probably you'll have plenty of people picking Boise State, though. And they did their thing last year, as you all know. Fresno State had a great year last year. We'll see if that carries over this time around too. And then we mentioned San Diego State, which new coaching, new everything else, but still solid. Always finding ways to win games and doing it, grinding it out. Wyoming is an interesting look. Then will they be in the mix this year? I don't know. It's. I'm gonna give it to you and get your look at the Mountain West. I mean, definitely a lot of scenarios to look into here, John.
Yeah. Well, before I dive into some of the teams, so what would you think about a conference where you have the remaining Pac-4 and they add like Boise, San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and then there's talks of like SMU and Tulane. Like that'd be a pretty good conference, like a 10-team conference. I mean, it's not as good as the Pac-12 was, and we'll get to the Pac-12 tomorrow. But this could be like one of the best years of the Pac-12 ever, and like it's completely disappearing.
I know it's what makes it so difficult. Like the Pac-12 is rated to the valuation, the projections are really good for a lot of these teams. Oregon, Washington, USC.
There's like 6 teams that are really good. The top 6 teams are, great.
It's such a shame. I really blame
George, what's his face, for like thinking they could get $50-something million a year. Like, dude, take the money when you could get it. Like you're on the West. I know you have brands, but you're on the West Coast, and like just makes me mad. Like I think they wanted to stay together for the most part, but the commissioner just completely fumbled the bag on everything, and the school presidents too. It's sad.
Oh, really in a big way. I think, like you mentioned, I think they jumped the gun so hugely. Like, and I really didn't really even consider your point from the beginning of the show where you mentioned that you're actually losing your advantage to get to the college football championship by going to a bigger conference. You're absolutely right. It's a great point. It's like there's a reason why the SEC always plays all those cupcakes at the beginning of the season. Like they don't want to lose their advantage. With the record, it's just the Pac-12 has just never really had that kind of vision, and I can talk about like the previous commissioner and how bad he was, and
Yep.
how he fumbled the ball with the TV contract, and that's probably why we are where we are. They had the TV deal. They had a good like TV network. If they were with ESPN or something like an ESPN like branded network, we'd have a Pac-12. I mean, let's be honest. Like these are strong teams. They recruit well. They send people to the NFL. It's just such a bummer that it just has come to this. So I also would have said, by the
Anyway,
way. Oh, go ahead, John.
I was gonna say we digress. We can delve more into it tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
mention that as like a potential, you know,
I
conference that's being floated out there. Because
yeah.
what are these four schools going to do? Like, what's Stanford and Cal and Washington State and Oregon State going to do? Like, Cal and Stanford could probably go independent and they could probably still put a decent schedule together. But like, why do they want it? Like, I don't know if they want to do that. Like, it
Yeah.
just, I don't know. It's just a tough thing. So if you're trying to get a conference together, taking like the basically it's like taking the best of the best from like the other conferences and like kind of cobbling them together at this
Yeah.
point is kind
Yeah.
of the idea. But
That's what I
yeah,
thought
as
was.
for this,
I just thought that
yeah, go
that's what
ahead.
was going to happen. I thought the Pac-12 would have just merged with whatever was left over the Mountain West, and we would have had a new Pac-12. It honestly surprised me that like you had all that. Like,
Well, I think some of the thing is like Boise State would have been an easy addition for years, but they didn't
yeah.
want to be associated with a school like Boise State because it's not exactly Stanford. Like, let's put it that way. Um, so
Right.
they didn't
Right.
want to be associated with kind of a lower level kind of school,
Hmm.
where the academics aren't as the entry requirements and the academics aren't as strong, and they just wanted to be with their own kind. Well, it's kind of coming back to haunt you at this
Really
point.
is. Very true. I mean, I've always appreciated that commitment to academics, but it's just like when you're too hard headed about that, as you said, it has ultimately cost them in a lot of ways. And so, anyway, let's go to Mountain West and let's get
All
your
right, yeah.
predictions.
All right, Mountain West. Love this conference because you get the late night college degenerate action. You get like late Friday nights. Like this is great. Um, I think when you look at the top of the conference, you're going to have four or five teams here that are going to be in contention. Your usual suspects with Boise State and Air Force, San Diego State, Wyoming, Fresno. Those are kind of your top five teams. I'm not a huge fan of Boise State, to be honest with you. I know they kind of resurrected their year last year after um, Bachmeyer, as we mentioned, he ended up going to Louisiana Tech, but he basically quit the team, and Talon Green came in, and he was more of a running focus, uh, doing a lot of options and those kind of things. And their offense just really took off to go along with their defense, which is pretty good. But they had, Dirk Cutter kind of came in as like a consultant slash coordinator, and that kind of really sparked everything. But that's gone now. Green still remains, but I just have questions about their offensive philosophy and what they're doing with that team. They've kind of lost a little of the mystique, on the blue field recently. And their coach Avalos is kind of the same thing as we talked about with Toledo. Like, I really don't trust him that much. So I get it why they're one of the favorites, but I'm really honestly not that big of a fan of Boise. But then again, like, all right, like, who's gonna rise up and kind of beat them at this point? Um, Air Force is always really solid. We know that Calhoun has been there for years. At this point, they do lose Hazik Daniels and Brad Roberts were the kind of the 1-2 combination of their quarterback running back, but we know with Air Force, it's just it's a system. So as long as you have the line play, which they do, plug another quarterback in there, give it to the fullback, and Air Force does even in before these new rules with the NCAA, they seem to pass, do more passing plays than say Army and Navy. But I don't see any problem with the new quarterback coming in, whoever it is. And there's a competition going on, and their defense was just absolutely fantastic last year, and they should be pretty good. They like were one of the top 10 in terms of points allowed last year in the country. So and they won 10 games. They did have a couple losses, like head scratching losses, or else they would have been in the Mountain West championship game, which kind of worries you. Like, they can, if they play a team that has a good defensive line and can kind of stop that option at the line of scrimmage and not, let you get those 4 or 5 yards at a time. they're going to be, they're beatable in that situation. But there's not a lot of teams that can do that. But I'm pretty high on this Air Force team. Um, if you move down the list here to San Diego State, I'm not feeling it for them this year. I know we talked about it earlier, Dave, when we mentioned the Ohio game.
Yep.
Their defense kind of slipped back towards the end of the year, so that's why I'm kind of thinking when it comes to the over in that game. You usually think of San Diego State. It's kind of like this grinded out team, like they want to win games like 17-14. Well, that's not really what they were doing towards the end of last year
This is
when
true.
they were
This is true.
down to like their fourth or fifth quarterback was actually a former cornerback, Jalen Maiden. And he played really well, and he's the projected starter heading into this year. So they're going to be a little bit better on offense, not quite as good on defense. So maybe some overs for the Aztecs this year, especially that week one game, like maybe a shootout with Ohio. But I'm not a fan of Brady Hoke. I think maybe he's kind of taken them as far as he can get them. Um, I really don't. They're certainly not comparable to like the Rocky Long years with his defense that he had there. So they're going to be in the upper half of the conference. I'm just not feeling them for to make the championship game. Um, and then you have Fresno State, Jeff Tedford, fantastic job, like one of the better mid-major coaches in the country. Obviously all the work he did back with at Cal, with Aaron Rodgers, and then he comes over to Fresno, instantly turns the program around. Has to step down for some health reasons. Comes back again last year and wins the Mountain West Championship. Now, Jake Haener's gone. He's in the NFL, which is a concern, and they lose some other key offensive pieces. But they do get transfer, as we mentioned, Mikey Keene over from UCF. So that was a good get for them. I think I'm just going to trust, uh, Tedford in the coaching. Their schedule's pretty favorable. So I just definitely think that's when you have a bunch of teams that are kind of jumbled. I think that's kind of where I lean is when you go with coaching. And then like kind of the last team in the upper half, I would say was Wyoming, and they were projected to be just absolutely horrible last year. They were like gutted in the transfer portal. But Craig Bohl did a fantastic job and got them to a bowl game, and they won. They beat Ohio. Obviously, we talked about how Ohio wasn't completely full strength, but still, I mean, that's a good win. They return almost every starter on defense, so their defense is going to be fantastic. They just need to get a little something out of their offense. They have their quarterback Andrew Peasley does return, but didn't hit a high percentage of his passes. So it's all going to come down to if their offense can be more productive. But their defense should keep them in every game. And we know Wyoming is a really tough place to play, so they could be a very sneaky pick to win the conference, in my opinion. Those are kind of your top teams. Then after that, it's just kind of again kind of meh for the rest of the conference. San Jose State, Chevin Cordero returns, and he was a Hawaii transfer at quarterback. They did make a bowl game last year. So they should be a bowl team, but I don't see them making that jump to like the top of the conference. Now, Colorado State is a team that a lot of people are high on. So you had Jay Norvell come in last year, and it was just a complete just dumpster fire because they had so many injuries and they were breaking in a new offensive line. They barely could score. But now they have a lot of depth and experience because of guys that played. They bring in more transfers. They're going to be much improved this season, Colorado State. So they're going to move up the standings, I think. So they could be a team that could sneak up on some people. Not sure they're the top of the conference this year, but they could definitely sneak up on some people. UNLV has a new head coach. They bring over Barry Odom, and he was previously at Missouri. He was defensive coordinator at some other SEC schools. So I think that was a pretty good hire. And they have the whole key to UNLV is does Doug Brumfeld play their quarterback? When he plays, like UNLV is very competitive and could get some upsets. I think they could be a bowl team if he plays all year, but not sure. Again, like they're kind of a middle of the pack team and not really anything more than that. But I do like their trajectory for sure moving forward. And then New Mexico could be improved. I will say it certainly can't get any worse for them. They had just an absolutely horrific offense last year. They could barely score. They were the benefits of UAB's misfortune, I guess you could say, with the whole Trent Dilfer scenario, because they bring in Dylan Hopkins, UAB's quarterback, and their offensive coordinator, the former interim coach from UAB, Brian Vincent. So there's some good continuity there. And we know their defense is good. Like, they were still, even in these games, scoring like 10, 13 points. So they can just get a little bit of offense. They could be a bowl team. So I think New Mexico will be a little bit improved. And then I think the two teams in the bottom of the conference are going to be Utah State and Hawaii. Utah State just loses a ton of production. And, they had a bunch of close wins. So I'm just not seeing it. They only had 9 starters returning. They lost a lot of their playmakers. I'm just not feeling it with Utah State at all. Blake Anderson is usually a pretty good coach, so maybe they'll surprise, but I'm just not really seeing it from Utah State. And then poor Hawaii should probably be in the bottom of the conference again. Timmy Chang, the famous Hawaii quarterback, he's doing his best trying to get his run and shoot implemented, but it's been a struggle. They were competitive, I will say, in some conference games last year, but I think it's going to be another rough year for Hawaii. So, the bailout game at midnight on the islands, you always look to take Hawaii, but maybe that's not the case this year. We'll see them next week 0, playing at Vanderbilt. So we'll see. It's a long trip. We'll see how that goes for Hawaii. But yeah, so if I'm going to make a bold prediction here for the Mountain West, I'm going to go Air Force and Fresno State, just to be a little different, because I think this conference can be pretty wide open for these for those top teams. And I think that's how it's going to shake out. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the conference.
Yeah, I love this. I think first of all, Fresno State, I'm all about that. I think Tedford will continue his good run that he's having with the Bulldogs. Like, that's a solid program right now. That's where I want to be. Yeah, you really did make a good point about San Diego State's defense, just not, and just as you mentioned, Brady Hoke's just a good coach to fade in general, like a general principle. So it's a really good point on that as well. Before we get into this, they always set odds for the first week of the season in the week 0 games way in advance. So if you'd like to hear it, the over-under for the Ohio-San Diego State game coming up, 49 points.
Wow. You know what, Dave? I'm still playing the over. I believe in Ohio's offense.
Yeah.
And I don't think San Diego State's defense is going to be as good as it has been in the past. I mean, the Hawaii Bowl, they gave up 25 to Middle Tennessee State.
Yep.
Looking at them right now, they only have 6 starters returning. Yeah. I think and San Diego State has improved on offense, like I talked about when they put Maiden in there. So I'm in on the over. Give me the over for that game.
Yeah, I'm seeing it too. And if the percent of bets on the thing doesn't necessarily reflect exactly where the public is, but be that as it may, 87% so far. And granted, this is probably not that big a sample size, but it does say something when it's 87% of the public is on it. So yeah, I think your head's in the right spot here. Pretty cool.
Let's do it. Yeah, we got 7 games next week on week 0. So
that'll be fun. Yeah, week 0 is gonna be a good time. It's gonna be a good time. I think I'll actually be in the mix, watching them this year. I'm really looking forward to these games. This will be quite an interesting weekend. It gets bigger and bigger each week too.
Yeah, it's crazy. A couple years ago, it was all right, we're gonna have one game in Ireland. Well, there is a game in Ireland this year, but just in general, we're gonna have one kickoff game, but now it's not a full schedule, but you have 7 FBS games, and then if you want to do a little FCS betting, there's 3 FCS games that day too. So you got a full schedule of almost a full schedule of college football that day.
Yeah,
so it's gonna be great.
Query for you: is Nebraska Minnesota the game that's in Ireland this year?
No, it is Notre Dame and Navy next week.
Okay, so then will Navy be the team that does not win a game on American soil this year?
Oh, man, Northwestern. What does that say about Scott Frost? What a loser that guy was. Oh, my God. Lost to 1-11 Northwestern, their only win in didn't even get a win on American soil, and they beat him in
Wow.
Ireland, and then he's gone. And then what ends up happening with the Northwestern program in the last couple of months? Oh my goodness.
Incredible.
Uh, yeah,
And
Scott Frost, but he fooled a lot of people at UCF, that's for sure.
yeah, me too. Like, yeah, I was one of
Yeah,
them. Not gonna not gonna lie. So yeah. So predict. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. But anyway, my predictions for the Mountain West. Yeah. So I definitely like Fresno State. The other team. I mean, I know it's the team we all love to hate, and certainly we're kind of in alignment as a panel for this. But listen, we can hate them, but Boise State's still going to win at least 7 games this year. So I don't want to fight that. So I'll go Boise State for the second team.
yeah. No, I can't like say no, that's not going to happen because they're clearly talented. I'm just
Yeah.
not a fan of them at the moment and kind of how they do
No,
things.
totally,
So
totally, totally,
it's going
totally.
to be a fun conference race for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. So that leaves us with one conference to recover. We can do Independence too tonight since we have a little extra time.
Yeah,
So
sure, might as well. There's 3 of the 4 are not like group. Well, we can do the 3 that are not, and then we can save Notre Dame for tomorrow.
yeah, let's save Notre. We can trash Notre Dame tomorrow.
Yeah, where's Tommy when you need him,
Oh
right?
my gosh, I know. It was big finger. Tommy with big finger. Yeah. All right. So we'll save Notre Dame for tomorrow. But first, before getting into any of that, Sun Belt Conference, which is again, is just like, is it safe to say they are the best conference in the big group of 5 right now? Yeah.
It's close.
Yeah.
Like they have some dead weight at the bottom of
Mm-hmm.
the conference. Like Old Dominion, Arkansas State, ULM, and Texas State are 4 of the worst teams in the country. But outside of that, like their top teams are really good.
Yeah.
So it's if the bottom could improve a little bit, I would say yes. But as of right now, I just because of that top to bottom, I don't think they're as good as the AAC or the Mountain West. But it's close. Like their top teams are really good though, and which we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. But so in the Sun Belt, I mean, these top teams are quite the top teams. Like we had Troy last year, had just an amazing time. USA, University of South Alabama. And then of course the talk of the town actually there was actually 2 talks of the town last year. Coastal Carolina and James Madison. Boy, you talk about 2 teams that are on the rise. Like those are great programs. Now Marshall had a nice season too, but as we've talked about, Marshall is going to be moving to greener pastures. This coming, I think it's going to be next year because I see they're still in the Sun Belt this year.
Yeah, I don't think they're moving.
Oh no, they're moving into the Sun Belt. As you mentioned, I had the backwards.
Yeah, so yeah,
they came into the
yep.
Sun Belt. Yeah.
Yep.
So they're actually just getting started in that case. Yeah. And then one other team I kind of I always had an eye on for a while was Georgia State, though it didn't really go so well for them last year. So that's kind of a drag. I'm kind of disappointed. And then Louisiana post Billy Napier did okay. I mean, they were all right. We'll see what they have this coming year. But all in all, a very fun conference to follow, and it should be a pretty solid year for the Sun Belt. John, what are your thoughts on the Sun Belt? Who do you have coming out of this conference? This will be a fun one.
Yeah, this is a great. I love the Sun. I love the Sun Belt. Again, they're going to give you some weekday games too. Not as many as Conference USA. So I think they need to do Monday games or something. I don't know. Because we need more Sun Belt like Sunday, Monday or something. I don't know. Because the Sun Belt needs its own designated time. Because this is a really good conference.
Yeah.
Like I said, the East is definitely stronger than the West because in the West you have, like I said, 3 teams that are pretty much dead weight, and we'll quickly mention them. Arkansas State. Butch Jones still has a job somehow. Is still coaching at Arkansas State.
Wow.
They're horrible. Their defense is just brutal. They had last year they had James Blackman, who's a former Florida State quarterback. I think you might remember him. Well, he's gone now, so that was the only player they had. So I don't know what they're going to be doing this year. It's not going to go well. ULM, Louisiana Monroe, to say it out, it's a really tough place to win at. And Terry Bowden has actually done a pretty good job getting them to 4 wins because it's usually just really rough there. But just because of just the constraints he has with talent and the location and budget and all that, it's just really tough to win there. And they just get gutted. Any good player just leaves in the transfer portal. So they're going to be at the bottom again. if they can win 4 games, it'll be another success. And then Texas State could be interesting in the future because they bring over GJ Kinney. He's the new coach, and I actually remember him being a quarterback at Tulsa. It's you're getting old when like you remember head coaches playing quarterback like 10 or 15 years ago. But he comes over from Incarnate Word, which like they're an FCS school, and they put up just 50, 60 points a game. Like their offense was unbelievable. So he's trying to bring that over to the FBS level. Might probably going to take a little bit, but they're going to score some points. So maybe Texas State is like an over team, but those 3 teams are clearly they drag that division down, and then the rest of the schools. It's a 2-team race between Troy and South Alabama. Quickly, we'll mention Southern Miss and Louisiana. I am not a fan of Louisiana. After Napier left, they tried to keep their talent together for the most part, and they did okay last year, but it clearly wasn't the same. Now they're losing a lot of experience. They had a number of close wins, so I'm not really seeing it out of Louisiana as they kind of slide back into mediocrity. Even when Napier was there, they won a bunch of close games, and I know they were kind of like always near the top of the conference, but I think they're really sliding back now, and I think they're further behind Troy and South Alabama. And then Southern Miss is interesting because they don't really have a quarterback. They played like a number of quarterbacks last year because they were injured, and they have Frank Gore Jr. Just give him the ball in the Wildcat, and he'll make it happen. But I think they're a team on the rise, so watch out for them in the future. I think they're going to be a bowl team, but they're not the class of the division, which is clearly South Alabama and Troy. Both teams won 10 games last year, which is what you rarely see uh, for the Sun Belt. They each return their respective quarterbacks. So that's for Troy, Gunnar Watson, and then for South Alabama, Carter Bradley. But the difference is South Alabama returns a number of starters. They have 9 starters returning on offense and 9 starters returning on defense, and their defense is one of the uh, better, better defense in the Sun Belt, as with Troy. But I think that continuity is much better with South Alabama compared to Troy. Troy only has 6 defensive starters returning, and Troy's defense was really good. I'm not going to deny that. I mean, they won 12 games last year. I mean, it was they were great. But I think South Alabama has a little bit more punch on offense. And if you remember, Dave, they had UCLA beat in the 3rd game of the year
Yep.
last year in UCLA. They should have won that game. And their only other loss was a close loss to Troy. It was a really low scoring game, 6-10. It could have gone either way. So I think South Alabama gets their revenge this year and wins the division. I'm really high on this team to make to win the conference and make some noise. Their coach Kane Womack came over from Indiana. He's done a fantastic job so far in his tenure there. Troy's going to be good again. Don't get me wrong, and they're still going to be pretty good on defense. Like I mentioned, Watson returns at quarterback. But I just think South Alabama is a little more experienced and a little more talented, and they get their revenge this year. One of my favorite under the radar games, not week 0, but week 1, South Alabama at Tulane. That's going to be a fantastic game.
Yeah.
So some group of 5 action, like 2 of the better teams in their respective conferences. But yeah, I'm all over South Alabama for this division. And then you go to the other side, and there's only one. There's one team that's a complete just dumpster fire. Old Dominion's going to be absolutely horrific. So bet under wins on them. We're looking at their schedule. They might just win 1 game all year. They've lost their best players in the transfer portal to Power 5 schools. As I mentioned before, they lost their quarterback. Hayden Wolf left for Western Michigan, but he was okay. Like I'm not gonna shit on him. And then they're bringing in the offensive coordinator from Fordham and the backup quarterback from Fordham to be their quarterback. I don't think it's going to go very well for Old Dominion this year. So they're a complete dumpster fire. Fade them, and they're going to finish last in the division. Georgia State might be a little bit better. They lost a lot of close games last year. So their record was a little bit deceiving. If you remember, they had a crazy game with North Carolina. They lost by like 7. They're a pretty talented team. They just lost a lot of close games. So we'll see if they can improve on that. But they're kind of pegged towards the bottom of the division. And then Georgia Southern, your boy Clay Helton,
Clay
Dave.
Helton. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. He actually did a good job last year.
He
They
did.
got
He
to a
did.
bowl game. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it.
He did all
Came
right.
in and completely turned their option offense into an air raid passing attack. Brought in a Kyle Van Treese from Buffalo to run it, and it worked. And he did great. Considering the expectations they had going in, like we all thought it was going to be a dumpster fire, and they won 6 games and made a bowl. They actually did lose the bowl game, which was annoying. I think we all had them against Buffalo, but it was a good year. So he's trying to recreate the same thing this year, bringing in Davis Brin from Tulsa. I think he is better than Van Treese was coming in from Buffalo, so that could work. But those are clearly the bottom 3 teams in the division, and then you have your top 4 of Appalachian State, Marshall, Coastal Carolina, and James Madison. Now, James Madison, the stupid NCAA, still not eligible to play for the Sun Belt Championship. This is a team that came up from the FCS last year, not much expectations, and just they would have played in the Sun Belt Championship if they were
Yep.
eligible, but they couldn't because of the NCAA is messed up for whatever reason. Yeah, oh yeah, you can join this conference, but you cannot play in the conference championship game. How the fuck does that make any sense to me? I don't know. But it is what it is. They do. Their quarterback Centeo graduated, so they have to replace him. But they still return a number of players on defense. They do lose some offensive production, as I mentioned, but they should still be solid, and they prove they can compete with the rest of the league. And even if they can't win the officially win the conference, but they're going to be in contention. Um, I'm not a fan of Appalachian State this year. They went 6-6 last year, and I don't see it really getting that much better for them. They're kind of like Louisiana, like they were the old guard of the Sun Belt,
Yep.
and now they've kind of slipped back to the pack with everybody else. Um, they're breaking in a new quarterback. They're always going to be kind of solid on the lines, but I'm just not really a fan of them for this year. So the 2 teams I think it comes down to for me is Marshall and Coastal Carolina. Now Marshall, terrific defense. I mean, they were just like smothering last year. Again, a team that just needs a little bit more production on the offensive side of the ball. They had their quarterback Cam Fancher took over in the second half of last season and kind of gave them a little more stability. And they have Rashawn Ali, who's just a dynamic playmaker and running back. They do lose a lot on defense, but I trust their system and the talent they brought in. They did beat Notre Dame on the road last year, if you remember that, which is just a terrific win for Marshall. Um, so it's going to come down to them and Coastal. And Coastal is an interesting team because, as we discussed with Liberty, they lose Chadwell, who goes to Liberty, their coach, and they bring in Tim Beck, who has been an offensive coordinator at a number of schools. Nothing like amazing, like he's been at NC State and Texas. But I think the key here is not him. I think the key is Grayson McCall. And he
Mm-hmm.
returns again back for another year. He's only a junior, so he could play again. Like he flirted with the NFL. He flirted going to like SEC schools. He's clearly the best player in this conference. Has a number of other offensive starters returning. So they're going to be fine, I think, on offense. Their defense really took a step back last year. And I think that might be their issue with some of these other teams in the conference. But I think they might just outscore teams really in this conference. And they get Marshall at home, which I think is their toughest, uh, the closest competitor, rather. And then James Madison is ineligible, and they get them at home. In their conference road games, I'm looking at their schedule right now. I just told you at Old Dominion's a complete dumpster fire. At Arkansas State, all right, Butch Jones, like forget that. At Georgia Southern could be a little tricky, and at Appalachian State could be a little tricky, even though I'm not a huge fan. So even if they just split those 2 and then won the rest of their games, like they're going to win the division at like 7-1 or 6-2. So I think with those games at home and with McCall, I think they're gonna one last stand here for Coastal Carolina. It's kind of one of those things like you got to um, prove you can beat them until you pick against them. If McCall is out though, as we saw, he's like the whole team. They went to James Madison at the end of the year last year when they had everything clinched and McCall was hurt, and they sat him, and they got just absolutely obliterated. So he needs to play, but if he plays all year, I think they're going to win the division. So again, chalky pick. I guess it's chalky. I mean, they're one of the favorites, but they're not like an overwhelming favorite. But Coastal and South Alabama would be my pick for the Sun Belt Championship game. But yeah, I can't wait to watch some of these teams and some of the non-conference games too. Like I mentioned, some really terrific games. Coastal plays at UCLA week 1, so there you go.
Yeah.
That's on ESPN at like 10:30 East Coast time anyway on week 1. Like that's the perfect way to cap off your college football Saturday.
Definitely. And John, I would absolutely take the shots in that game. I'm sure they're going to be getting points.
I think I saw maybe like it was 17 or something like that. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting game.
Oh yeah.
I would say bet the over for that one.
That too. Yeah, because that's what happened with the South Alabama. That game was like 56-53 or something crazy like that. So I'm like, absolutely, I could see that happening with the shots as well. Like it's definitely gonna be a lot of points. So yeah, what another like really interesting game. I even told you about it. I think it was in the middle of our golf preview one time. I was like,
it was like months ago. You had that game circled on your calendar.
It's pretty cool. So we'll see how that one plays out.
What are you feeling for the Sun Belt?
Yeah, no, well, I'm definitely with you we were picking. Well, I think we both agree on Coastal, right? Or because James Madison is technically ineligible, which I get.
Yeah, they can't make it. So even if they finish first again, they can't play.
That sucks. So it's just it's ridiculous, these rules.
But they can somehow make a bowl game, I guess. If there's not enough teams, they can play in a bowl, which is. Here you go. You can play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but you can't play in the Sun Belt Championship.
Who was it that was rendered ineligible for that purpose? Because somebody had to be wiped out for some reason. I think it was like a COVID strike or so, COVID outbreak.
Yeah, I remember Rutgers got in because the whole team got wiped out for COVID. So they're like, all right, Rutgers, you're in.
That's it. That's what it was. Yeah. What a weird spot. So yeah, for that division, I'm gonna go with Coastal. I mean, I just can't quit them. They're fun to watch. What a fun team! And if they actually pull off the upset at UCLA, I mean, it doesn't affect the conference schedule at all, but it certainly is gonna get people talking. It's gonna be a very interesting, year for them. Troy, a team that went 12-2, and it could have been 13-1 if it wasn't for a Hail Mary in a game at Appalachian State. I think that's the team I'm taking out of the West. I think they're going to take. I mean, you're right about the defensive starters. Like that's going to be a real challenge. But I think what I'm banking on is that the depth will be there and the recruiting will be there. I have no idea, but I certainly think they've been very solid through a long time. South Alabama, I feel pretty good about too. So I wouldn't really be surprised if South Alabama were to take it instead. But I feel like I probably would. Historically, I think I'd go with Troy, because they've probably been more consistently good for a longer period of time. But South Alabama is pretty good. I mean, they've been solid for a couple years now. I think I remember weren't we like in the sports book one time following a South Alabama game? I'm trying to remember what happened in that game.
Yes, I think we were.
Yeah.
I think that's when they were trash.
Yeah,
like,
it was.
Against them. But now, like I'm all over. Like I told you, that first game week 1.
Yep.
I'll take South Alabama with the points at Tulane. Like anything over a touchdown, like I'm in on that.
That's a good call. Sure. That's a good call. I mean, if they can hang with UCLA on the road, what would keep them hanging with Tulane? Like I completely agree. It's a great call. So yeah, so Troy and Coastal will be my picks for the Sun Belt, and I feel like we'll probably have, if nothing else, they'll be right there like all year. So fun times ahead for Sun Belt. All right, that does it for our conferences tonight. We will continue our conference previews tomorrow with the Power 5 conference previews. We could have so much to talk about in that show. It's going to be so many scenarios, so many storylines.
Do you want to do a few quick words on the independents?
Yes,
not named Notre Dame.
Yes,
correct. There's only 3 of them now because like everyone's joined conferences. It's Army, UMass, and UConn. My Huskies are in the independents. So yeah, honestly, I'm not going to waste much time on UMass. They're going to be pretty bad again. They added some transfers. They actually did bring in a decent number of like Power 5 transfers, so upgraded their talent a little bit. I mean, we'll see how they can do. They do play a week 0 game next week, so ESPN primetime next Saturday night, UMass at New Mexico State. Set your clocks for that one. That'll be interesting. But hey, beats having no college football. But yeah, they're not going to be favored in any games. They
Hmm.
went 1-11 last year. I don't know. Maybe they'll win a couple. We'll see. But yeah, we'll watch them in prime time next week. Army, they're dealing with the same thing that the other academies are with the new rule with the cup blocking. They kind of had a down year last year at 6-6, and they had two FCS wins, so they weren't eligible to make it to a bowl. And they're bringing some new. Well, they have to have a new quarterback because the guy they were using graduated, so they don't have a ton of experience otherwise. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of Army. Again, it's kind of like a system team. Like you
Yep.
really don't know what to make of their recruiting or anything. They just kind of run their system. They schedule to make like 6 or 7 wins. Like I'm seeing, I'm seeing UMass is on their schedule. Like Delaware State, ULM. Like there's a few wins here, but I don't know if they can uh, make it to a bowl because there are some other tough games.
Hmm.
But yeah, their Army's always a tough team kind of to play at home and at West Point. Because you have all the cadets there. It's just a tough little trip to make. But yeah, I think if I had to say like the best of the three academy schools, it's Air Force by far. They're going to win
Hmm.
the
Yep.
Service Academy Trophy. And then certainly, last but not least, my UConn Huskies, who went 6-6 last year, just completely out of nowhere. Really, Jim Mora did a fantastic job in year one. They're only deeper and stronger this year because he brought in more Power Five transfers. They have their entire offensive lines returning. They have 9 returning starters on offense, 8 on defense. Their offensive defensive line should be really good. Brought in more Power Five transfers, as I said, to bolster their secondary and their receivers, which was a weakness. And their schedule is much easier this year. They do have a couple of really tough games. Like they're not going to win at Tennessee for sure. They play some ACC schools, like they play NC State, they play Duke, they play Boston College, but a couple of those are at home, so they're definitely winnable. My recommendation, I see the over under was at 4.5 yesterday. I definitely would bet the over. I think UConn, as long as like there's not like a rash of injuries or anything, I think they're gonna get to another bowl. So 6 wins for sure.
Yep.
I really like the trajectory that Mora has been taking them. Certainly, compared to Randy Edsall, who's a complete and utter clown,
Yeah.
fool. The last few years of his tenure, I just look what Mora has done in the year and a half since he's been here, and I'm looking for another good season. It's on paper. It's all setting up to be there with the schedule and all the players they have back. So I would be very surprised and honestly disappointed at this point if they don't get to a bowl. So 6-6, I think, is like the floor for UConn. And I love to see them win a couple of these games against like the ACC schools and like start to get noticed and be in that next wave of conference realignment. That would be the goal. Like I know people love to stay in the Big East, but that's really not where like college athletics is like basketball centric is not like where you want to be. Like you want to have all sports, be great and in a major conference, not just like your basketball team. So that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good season for UConn, and fingers crossed on that. And yeah, so that's like the three minor independents, and we can mention Notre Dame tomorrow night.
Yep. Yeah, it is interesting to see, just staying on the topic of independence, like BYU is going to be joining a conference pretty soon. I think it's a good move. I'm glad to see that finally. They've been
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, they were playing like you remember their schedule. They played like in the beginning of the year anyway, because you can't play like big teams in like November, but they were playing like 4 or 5 schools out. They were like the de facto Pac-12 champions one year. So they beat everybody in the Pac-12. I remember they beat like USC and like Washington and Arizona State. Like they were really impressive.
Yep.
For a couple of those years, we'll see how they do in the Big 12. We can talk about them tomorrow.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. Like we were saying before, I could see Stanford and Cal going independent. I mean, they have. Well, I shouldn't say Cal. Cal's broke. Like we know that their school is broke. But Stanford has enough money to go independent.
Yeah.
Like the question is like, do they really want to do that? Like I don't know. We'll see how this all plays out.
Yeah, that's a good question, because when you talk about other sports, there are other sports in college sport athletics besides football.
Yeah.
And so Cal has to factor that in, because they have basketball and baseball and so many of them.
Yep. And that's the whole thing too. Like I feel like we need to separate football from all the other
Yeah.
sports. Like,
Yeah.
make your conferences for football based on however the hell you want, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
the best markets, TV, whatever. But then keep keep everything else like regionalized. Like there's no reason why like the Washington girls field hockey team should be flying to Rutgers to play a game. Like that makes no sense whatsoever. Like football should be separate, and maybe that's where this is eventually heading. I don't know, and they could kind of break away football and do its own thing, and then keep everything else under the NCAA. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's the long term thing, but it just doesn't. You're right. Like it doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, and that's actually a good segue for tomorrow, because like that we're gonna really get into that tomorrow. Like, where is this going? Because I don't think we're stopping at just this. I'm sure there's
Oh
gonna.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. The next conference to be gutted is going to be the ACC. Like
Yeah.
everyone can see it coming,
100%.
and it's a question of when, not if. Like it's Florida State's already talking about getting out. We want out. Like why one school's making double our money, the money that we make, like and they're kind of stuck in like the ACC like grant of rights, but they're trying to get out of it. Like that's the next conference to get plucked, and then we'll see where it all goes from there.
Absolutely, John. So with that, we say goodnight. John, thank you so much for doing this. This has been really, really fun, and we'll pick it up tomorrow. We'll meet you at we'll cover the Power Five. We'll do our season storylines, and of course, the annual tradition of who's on the hot seat this year. That'll be a fun segment. So until then, John, have a great rest of your evening, and take care. Thanks so much for doing this.
All right, you too, Dave. We'll see you tomorrow.
Sounds good. All right, John. Thank you so much. Good times, John. Great times. What a good spot. Boy, so much to unpack. Am I right? And this is just a group of five. So when we get to tomorrow's show, when we get into the Power Five previews, there is going to be so much juice to get into. The coaching changes, the massive realignment for so many big conferences, the ending of a conference. I mean, and the TV contracts. They're going to completely switch over to completely different networks in the next couple of years. So we've had a lot of fun with this tonight with the group of five. And that's the thing. I think the group of five is becoming a bigger part of the sport, even though it would seem like it's being marginalized, but not really. Because you also have between the expanded playoffs and some of these conferences just simply getting stronger. I think the group of five is going to be a big player for the years to come. So that's it for us. I'm Dave Medina. You know me as Davey's Eating a Sandwich on TikTok and Instagram and Threads and all the cool platforms. It has been nice to do this with you tonight. Stay tuned, those of you watching us live. I'll be back on Twitch with Sandwich Music. I'm going to play some piano music for you. We'll also be taking requests. So you can look for us there at twitch.tv/Davey's Eating a Sandwich. If you missed any part of this podcast, you can catch the replay on all the podcast platforms and also on our YouTube channel at Davey's Eating a Sandwich, and look for us under the Sandwich Corner. We hope you've enjoyed it, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening. And again, if you're watching us live, stay tuned and follow us over on Twitch. We'll keep our party going over there. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.